Okay, so welcome back. We are doing the back. About custom pants fitting, and this will probably go pretty quick because we already basically did everything. It's just tweaking of the formula. Um, okay, so first thing is remember to do all your markings, including your guidelines, any darts, any notches. Um, Go ahead and do your 45-degree box, which includes your straight center back line. Okay, our angle here at the center back at the 45-degree angle is between 1 3/4 and 2 inches. Mine is 1 3/4. At the lower hip line level, we're going to go out toward the seam allowance 3/8 of an inch. Okay, and make a mark. All right, and that's what we're going to use to connect our curve, center back curve. Okay, but just do that part for just now. So mark anywhere between 1 3/4 to 2 inches on your diagonal 45-degree, and at the lower hip line, go out toward the seam allowance 3/8 of an inch. Okay. Now remember, in my back, I had 2 darts, right? And let's go over how I did my darts, how I got the calculation for my darts. And my screen sharing has stopped, so hopefully this is in frame so you can kind of see it. But this is the dart intake. Remember my waist, and this includes ease. Okay, so my waist with ease was 42, hip with ease, the finished measurement ease is 51. Okay, that leaves 9 inches of a difference. So just to recap, your side seams, you have 4 side seams, 2 in the front, 2 in the back, equals 4. In the back, let me go back, digress. Remember, these are darts. So the side seams, technically, they are darts because they come in. They're curved darts, but they're darts nonetheless. So you have 4. On the back pattern, you have either 2 darts or 4 darts. On the front, you have 2 darts or 0 darts. Okay, so the back, for the side seam, since you have 4, they're at 13%. So for me, 13% of 9 is 1 3/8. We're going to take the max. Okay, we're really not going to plot that, but we're going to use the max here to see the amount, the intake amount of our back and front darts. Okay, so just always take the max when it comes to your side seam darts. So for the back, if I use 2 darts, that's 16% for 2 darts. That will be 1.5 for each one of the darts. Keep in mind, we prefer not to go over 1 1/4, right? I'm at 1.5. That is over that 1 1/4. So I'll cross that out. I'm not going to use 2. I'm going to use 4 instead. So at 4, it's 8%. 8% of that 9 inches is 3/4 of an inch. Okay. Now, if I move that up to 7/8 of an inch, okay, so for 3/4 to 7/8 of an inch, remember I can go up to 1 1/4, so I have room. 7/8 of an inch. If I do that, and I have 4, so 2 on each side of the back, right? And then you have your 4 darts for your side seams. If I add all of that up, that gives me 9 inches. That's the reason why I did not have to have any front darts. Okay, so keep in mind I'm using 4 back darts, and it's going to be at 7/8 of an inch. Okay, and just for information as well, when it comes to front darts, even though we don't have it. Just to let you know, from the center front to the first leg of the dart is between 3 and 4 inches. Okay, the length of the front dart, the length of it is 3 inches, or up to the upper hip line. And the spacing, if you have more than 2, which you really shouldn't, it should only be 2, so 1 on each side. But if you have 2, sometimes you can. It's 1 1/4 inches apart from the first dart to the second dart. The back is basically the same. It is the same except for the length. So from the center back to the first leg of the dart is again 3 to 4 inches. The length of the dart is a little bit longer at 4.5. And what I usually say, it's between your upper and is midpoint of your upper and lower hip line. It's basically in the middle there. So that's about 4.5 inches. Some people go to 5, just to let you know. And the spacing again is 1 1/4. You can't really see that, but it's 1 1/4 inches apart if you have 2 darts on each side, which I will. Since we kind of already went through the dart intake, let's go over a couple more housekeeping things, and then we'll move on to the calculations. So the first thing is crotch length. My back is 19 1/4. And we kind of already went over how I got to the 19 1/4. Okay, so just to, I'm not sure, maybe we didn't. Let's go over it. Crotch length. My total, front to back, from the navel through the legs up into my natural waist in the back is 30 inches, right? Mind you, we're going to have to add ease to that, but this builds in the ease. So up front, you take 47% of that 30, that gives you 14. You minus out 1.5 standard measurement. So the front crotch length will be 12.5. For the back, you take 53% of that 30, you get 60. You add 1 1/4. That's, everybody gets that. 1 inch if you have, you know, I won't say regular to semi full hips. 2 inches if you're full hips or curvier. So I'm using the 2. So my measurements will be 16 plus 1 1/4 plus 2 inches gives me 19 1/4. That's for the back. So if you add those 2 up, it comes up to more than 30. All right, so that's how I got the crotch length. The crotch depth is, let's see, I need it to be, remember, 14 inches. So if I measure this back pattern, the whole back pattern here, up until the crotch line, thigh line, and remember, I'm measuring it using the stitch line, not the seam allowance line, but the stitch line. That is 11.5. All right. Now remember, we also need the waistband. So add in your waistband at 1 3/4 inches. You add that up, that equals 13 1/4. I need it to be 14, so I'm short 3/4, right? So what I'm going to do is use my shortened and lengthened line here. I'm going to cut across it at a later time, but cut across it, spread it out to 3/4 inch, and tape it back, right? Put a piece of scrap underneath and tape it all down. If you need to shorten it, all you do is fold it. You don't have to cut it or anything. All right, so let's go ahead and go over the crotch line, thigh line. So the updated formula is lower hip line average plus base intended ease for the thigh. And remember, we're using the 2/3. Yes. Sure, go say hi.
Hi guys. for more details about sewing.
We're gonna
If
do,
I wanna help my mom.
okay.
I wanna help my mom reach their goals.
Can I go now? Thank you. Divided that by 4 equals whatever that amount is, plus 1/4 inch, plus 1/2 inch. That gives you just the portion here, crotch line to thigh line. Okay, so remember, the average is with your belly, without the belly, take the average of that. Your back intended ease, remember we're using 2/3. Your thigh standard measurement is between 3/4 to 1 inch. I'm using 1 inch, so I'm taking 2/3 of that. Basically, it's 1/2 inch. So keep that in mind when we do these figures. So my lower hip line average is 49 plus 2/3 of the back intended ease. I'm using 1/2 inch, which gives me 49.5. All right, I'm going to divide that by 4, which is 12.38 plus 1/4 plus 1/2 inch equals 13.13, which is the equivalent of 13 1/8 inch. Now remember, when you are outlining, you copy your whole pattern. We already went through this in the front half pattern, but you copy the whole pattern except for the side seam. Okay, you don't need to copy the side seam because we're going to reshape the side seam itself. Okay, so now we got 13 1/8, and remember this is the saddle, right? So we're going to start here going toward the side seam. We're going to measure out 13 1/8. And if we put it here, 13 1/8, it's about 1 here. Make sure you can see that, right? It's about here. And then we're going to, from there, we're going to measure out our seam allowance, which is 5/8 of an inch, and that's about there. All right, now let's do the figure out about our saddle. Okay, and the saddle is the lower hip line plus belly, that measurement divided by 4, plus 1/4 inch plus 1/2 inch divided by 2. So mine is 50 divided by 4 equals 12.5 plus 1/4 plus 1/2 equals 13 plus 1/4. Divide that by 2, that's 6 5/8. All right, and so from the saddle toward the inseam, I'm going to measure 6 5/8. Make your mark. 6 5/8 is here. It's about there. And then I can't see measure. And then measure out your seam allowance, which is there. And then if you have to do any shaping to that part, you do the same thing. Take your original pattern, line it up, use that to shape. Okay, so moving on up to the lower hip line. Moving on up to the lower hip line, remember we extended this toward the seam allowance to out 3/8 of an inch. Keep that in mind. So we're going to take 53% of, that's old, 53% lower hip line average plus 2/3 of the back intended ease for the lower hip line. All right, so our lower hip line ease is total is 2.5 inches. So we're using 2/3 of that, which is 1 5/8. Okay, keep that in mind. So 53% of our average, again, which is 49, plus 1 5/8. That's the 2/3 of the back intended eaves of the total 2.5 equals 50 and 5/8. All right. Now taking 53% of that 50 and 5/8 gives me 26.83, right? I'm going to now divide that by 2, which gives me 13.42, which is the equivalent of 13 and 3/8 up until 13 and a half. It's kind of like right in the middle. So I would use 13 and a half because you can always shape your side seam, remember? And now we're going to go from here where we extended it that 3/8. We're going to go from there and there and go out 13 and a half, which is there, and then we're going to measure out 5/8 of an inch, which is there. All right, so I made those 2 marks. For your first part that you're going to do is your dart for your center back line, right? Now remember, the center back max is 3/4 of an inch, minimum is 1/2 an inch. I just did 3/4 of an inch, no rhyme or reason, could have did either one. I did 3/4 of an inch, okay? And this is from the straight center back, all right? So using your straight center back, you're gonna measure in the 3/4 or 1/2 an inch, make your mark there, okay? And then of course go back and mark in whatever your seam allowance will be. Now keep in mind, we came out 3/8 of an inch on your lower hip line. So what you're basically going to do is take your ruler and connect those dots. You're going to connect your 3/4 up here, slant line, and connect your 3/8 line here, all right? And you're going to go ahead and draw in that straight line going all the way down to the bottom of your box. And you only do this on the back pattern. And what this does is it helps you draw in that curve. All right. So now that we did that, and if you see that angle, coming in there? Okay, so what you want to do is from here, you want to connect your 45-degree line here, right? You want to connect, make sure that that curve connects there, and then you want to make sure that it connects at that 3/8, and then the rest should be that straight. Okay, so that's how you do that first dart. All right, so now going to the upper hip line. Okay, using the upper hip line. All right, upper hip line. Lower hip line plus belly, so that's that 1 measurement plus the 2/3 back intended ease. Okay, so we're going to use, and it's 53%. So remember, 53 is typically for the back, 47 typically for the front. Okay, unless you have a belly, then you use 53 for the front waist, lower waistline. So going back to the upper hip line, we're using 53% of my lower hip plus belly is 50, plus the intended back ease for the lower hip line, 2/3, right, is 1 5/8. So that gives me 51 5/8. 53% of 51 5/8 is 27.36. I'm going to divide that by 2. This gives me 13.68, which is the equivalent of 13 5/8 to 13 3/4. So using the, starting at the stitch line or slanted line of the center back line, we're going to measure out from here using the stitch line 13 3/4. 13 3/4. Oh, you okay? All right, 13 3/4, which is right here, and I need to add some paper. And then I'm gonna measure out the 5/8 of an inch. Okay. Now moving on to the upper hip, the lower waistline. Okay, now remember we had 2 darts here at 7/8 seam allowance. Remember from the center back line to the first leg needs to be between 3 and 4 inches. Mine is 4 inches. Thought that was better, but you can use anywhere between that amount. And then between the darts needs to be 1 1/4. Now my measurement for the back, I use 47%. Now mind you, again, you can use between 53 and 47. I use 47 because most of my weight is in the front, and I have kind of like a sway back, so I don't really have too much back there, so I don't want a lot of fabric back there. So I use 47% for my back measurement. Now remember, for our measurement here, we don't really use the 2/3, we just use the whole thing, and we'll divide it evenly when it comes to the ease. Okay, so we're going to take our top waistline, which is 42, and we're going to add the finished measurement ease according to the pattern. It's 1 inch, and then you're going to add anywhere between 1 3/4 and 2 inches. I just always use the most because you can always, fit at the end. So that is 45. Okay, that I'll be using. So I'll be taking 47% of 45, and I just already had it here. So 47% of 45 equals 2115. Excuse me, I'm going to divide that by 2. All right, and I get 10.58, which is the equivalent of 10 1/2 to 10 5/8. Okay, now you can do it 2 ways because you have 7/8 and 7/8, right? So you can add 10 5/8 plus the 7/8 plus 7/8 and just mark that, whatever that figure is, or you can just skip over. I need a measuring tape. Or you can just skip over the darts to equal up that 10 5/8, and I'll just show you that way. So you just start, I start here, not the 1, because typically not the whole 1 inch, and I'll just go here, up until I get to the first leg, hold it there, skip over, you see that, skip over the dart. Let me go back and use this hand so you can see. And what I do is skip from leg to leg, go over, all right, continue with the measurement to there, then skip over like that, and then go until I get whatever the measurement is, which is 10 5/8. But here it'll be 11 5/8 because, I don't use that 1 here. So that is here. Then go out 5/8 of an inch for the seam allowance. All right. So once you have all your dots plotted, then you're going to use, before we do that, remember we had to increase our crotch depth by 3/4 of an inch, right? Now I had already previously did it, so I'm just going to untape it so you can see what I did. But it's basically exactly what I did in the front. And if your pattern doesn't have a shorten and lengthen line, just do about 1 inch to 2 inches above your lower hip and create a line for yourself. So this is me adding in the 3/4 of an inch to the crotch depth. All right, and so now what you're going to do is just plot your markings here, right? Now what you do is you can use your original pattern. This is my old pattern, but I'm going to use that. Yeah, I'll just use that. And what you do is try to hit as many of the dots as you can, like that. Or the other way is to use a hip curve. Or you can do both. You can do and so now we're hitting the seam allowances, okay? So you try to hit as much as you can. If it goes outside of it a little bit, that's fine. You can, you know, adjust that during your final fitting, okay? You just try to hit as many of those dots as possible, but preferably start with the original pattern's side seam, because it may, you know, have shaping to it already, and then finish it up with the hip curve ruler. Okay, that looks like that. Okay, so when I come back to the lower hip line, I think I told you to start the measurement at the 3/8 of an inch. That's not right. Sorry, I don't even know why I said that. You started at the regular, so you leave that as a, I call it like a buffer, give you a little bit extra room in that area. So you actually started here, you know, where your original lower hip line starts. And then you go from there and measure out your 13.5. And you see I made the adjustments there, okay? And then from there is the 5/8. Okay, for that one. And there was one more thing I thought I forgot to tell you. Oh, about measuring. I think I didn't tell you to measure. All right, so for the crotch length, we know that this was supposed to be 19.25. All right, so what you're gonna do is measure along your curve here and make sure that is your 19.25. If you need to increase it or decrease it, remember we do it at the lady lumps, right? So the lady lumps here will be the lower hip line, okay? And so your spread or your triangle of your dart, the wide part will be at the lower hip line, down to the, and you can make your hinge point at the crotch line. Now, one thing, because I did add 3/4 of an inch, my lower hip line is actually up 3/4 of an inch. Okay, so I will measure 3/4 of an inch up from that original. Oops. 3/4 up from that original will be right about here. And I'm going to square a line out so you see it's not too much of a difference. So it's up to you whether or not you want to make it there, but that's more accurate. All right, so that is the 3/4. So I will still use my hinge point down here up to that point and draw my line just in case. I haven't even measured yet, but just in case, I wanted to show you where it will be. All right, so that will be your cut line. This will be your hinge. All right, meaning hinge, you cut up to that, don't cut through it, then go from there and cut. Okay, so you're cutting here, you're cutting up to here, but you do not cut through that. And what happens is when you open it, this becomes a hinge. Okay, so measuring that, let's see what I get. Mind you, I need 19¼ at least, or roundabout. And I think I may or may not have told you, as long as it's close, preferably not on the shorter side. So say this is 19, I would probably, it's best to go ahead and add that 1/4 inch, but say it was 19½, leave it at 19½. But if it's on the shorter side, go ahead and add. But if it's on the larger side, as long as it's, I would say no more than 1 inch. If it's over by inch or less, leave it be. All right, so let's see how much is mine. So mind you, I would like mine to say 20¼ because of where I keep mine. Mine is, it says 19 and about 3/4, which is 18 and about 3/4. Okay, so that's about 1/2 inch. I'm gonna remeasure just to be sure. But because mine is shorter, I will add. Yeah, it's about 19 3/4 or 18 3/4. Now, the reason why you want to add is because if you don't, this curve will start its curve into your buttocks sooner than what you want it, which causes that wedgie type of feeling and look down there. Now, some people like that look. I'm not one of them. So if you like that look, keep it. But if you don't, and like a more comfortable feel, then go ahead and do that. So I'm cutting up to the hinge, and for hinge points, I like to add tape for security, just in case. So cut up to it, but not through it, as you can see right there, and then start on the other side and cut all the way through. Now I needed to open about, what was it, 1/2 inch? I need paper. So hence, you see here, this created a hinge down here, right? So you can overlap it if you're going up, or you can go the other way if you're going down, right? So that created that hinge. So I need to open mine about 1/2 inch, which kind of, you know, will be about there. So I'm gonna have to add paper underneath it, and then you're just going to redraw this curve, nice smooth line there. Remeasure it for, you know, just ensure that you are correct now. And then when you're measuring it, you are measuring against the stitch line, or I'm sorry, when you're adding the amount that you need, like me, it's 1/2 inch. You're adding based on the stitch line, not the seam allowance. You're adding, so I will be adding 1/2 inch based on this stitch line here. Okay. And then that's basically it for the back. Once you do that, we will work on the waistline when we get to the waistline, which is, you know, a simple pattern there. So we'll just work on that before we actually cut out that portion. And that's it. And that is it for the back pattern. So if you have any questions about that, questions about the formula, about how to do any of the custom fitting, go ahead and let me know. When we come back, make sure to pre-treat your fabric, meaning wash it, dry it how you would normally do it, and go ahead and have your pattern already placed on the fabric, cut out, have your markings done, any clips, everything. So the next thing when we come back, we would just be sewing. Okay, so do all the prep work when it comes to laying out your pattern on the fabric, cutting it out and marking it up. Any questions on how to do that, there is a video in my library. Go ahead and check that out. Or if you have just individual questions, feel free just to ask it in the comments. All right, people, see you next time, and we will get to sewing.
Bye.